David walked through the long glass corridors of the Interspecies Conservation Shelter on a cold Tuesday morning in the year 2247. The massive building stretched across several city blocks, and inside it held creatures from across the galaxy, animals that had been rescued from laboratories, from cruel owners, and from dying worlds. The air smelled like recycled oxygen and cleaning solutions. Soft blue lights lined the walls, and behind each transparent panel was an enclosure. Some held creatures that were large and fierce, with scales and wings and teeth that gleamed in the artificial light. Others held smaller beings that huddled in corners, afraid and alone. David was 38 years old, and he worked as a software engineer in a tall office building downtown. He lived alone in a small apartment with white walls and few decorations. His life was quiet and predictable. He went to work, he came home, and he spent his evenings staring at computer screens. He had no family nearby, and he had few friends. Most people found him difficult to talk to because he was shy and spent too much time thinking about things rather than speaking about them. On weekends he would walk through the city without any real purpose, just to fill the empty hours. Today he had decided to visit the shelter for the first time. He was not sure why he had come. Perhaps it was because he felt something missing in his life, something that work and money could not fill. Perhaps it was simply because he had seen an advertisement for the shelter in a magazine and felt curious. Whatever the reason, he found himself here now, walking slowly past the enclosures and looking at all the different creatures. Most of the animals made him feel nervous. There was a large creature with purple skin and too many eyes. There was something that looked like a bird but was the size of a man, with feathers that seemed to sparkle in the light. There was a small round thing that floated in a tank of blue liquid. David walked past all of these without stopping for very long. Then he came to an enclosure at the end of a quiet hallway. The sign above it read, Lyrian Dragon Unit 7, not recommended for general adoption. David stopped and looked inside. At first he did not see anything. The enclosure was large and mostly empty. There were some rocks and a small pool of water, but the space looked lonely. Then David noticed a small shape in the corner, sitting perfectly still. It was a dragon, but nothing like the dragons in old stories or in movies. This dragon was small, perhaps the size of a large dog or a small horse. Its body was covered in scales, but the scales were not bright and shining like David would have expected. They were a dull gray color, almost like old concrete or stone. The dragon's wings were folded against its back, and they looked thin and delicate. Most striking of all were the dragon's eyes. They were open, but they did not seem to be looking at anything. They stared straight ahead with no emotion, no life, no interest in anything around them. David felt something shift inside his chest as he looked at the creature. He could see sadness in those empty eyes. It was a sadness so deep and so complete that it seemed to fill the entire enclosure. The dragon did not move. It did not acknowledge David's presence in any way. It simply sat there, motionless and alone, the way David himself often felt when he was at home in his apartment at night. A woman in a white uniform approached David. Her name was Rachel, and she was one of the shelter workers. She had kind eyes and spoke in a gentle voice. Rachel explained that Unit 7 had arrived at the shelter 3 years ago. The dragon had been rescued from a private collector who had kept her locked in a small cage in a basement. Nobody knew exactly what had happened to her, but it was clear that she had suffered greatly. When she first arrived at the shelter, she had not eaten for weeks. The staff had worried she would die. After time, Unit 7 had begun to eat again, and her physical health had improved. But something inside her remained broken. She did not interact with the other dragons. She did not play or explore her large enclosure. She simply sat in the same corner, day after day, staring at nothing. Many people had come to the shelter hoping to adopt a dragon, but when they saw Unit 7 they always chose a different one. They wanted a dragon that was lively and playful, not one that seemed so deeply sad and withdrawn. Rachel told David that Unit 7 was considered unadoptable. Most people did not have the patience or the skill to care for a traumatized animal. The shelter had begun to worry about what would happen to her. She could live at the shelter for many years, but it was not a place meant for long-term care. It was meant to be temporary, a place of healing before animals found new homes. David listened to everything Rachel said, and he never looked away from the dragon's empty eyes. He felt a strange pull, a connection he did not fully understand. This broken creature spoke to something broken inside himself. Her loneliness was a mirror of his own. Her sadness was familiar. What would it take to adopt her? David asked quietly. Rachel seemed surprised by the question. She explained the process. There would be paperwork and applications. There would be training sessions and home visits. There would be a waiting period to make sure David was serious and prepared. The shelter would need to verify that David had the financial means to care for a dragon, that his home was suitable, and that he had realistic expectations about the challenges he would face. "I understand," David said. "I want to do it anyway." Rachel smiled, a real smile that came from genuine warmth. She said she would help him begin the process. As they walked back toward the office to start the paperwork, David turned back one more time to look at Unit 7. The dragon had not moved. But David thought, just for a moment, that perhaps the empty eyes had flickered. Perhaps, in some very small way, the dragon had noticed that someone was looking at her. Someone who saw her sadness. Someone who did not turn away. Weeks passed before David received the final approval from the shelter. During those weeks, he prepared his apartment carefully. He cleared out a large room on the first floor and made it comfortable for the dragon. He bought soft blankets and placed them on the floor. He installed heating panels in the walls because the shelter director Rachel had explained that Lyrian dragons liked warmth. He set up a large stone pool filled with fresh water. He read every book he could find about dragon care, learning about their diet, their behavior, and their needs. He felt nervous and excited in a way he had not felt in many years. Finally, on a bright morning in spring, Rachel and another shelter worker named Kevin helped David bring the dragon home. They carried her in a special transport container that was designed to keep her calm and safe. When they released her into the prepared room, she looked around with the same empty expression she had always worn. She did not seem interested in anything David had prepared for her. She walked slowly to a corner of the room and sat down, just as she had done at the shelter. David named her Luna, though she did not respond to the name. For the first week, Luna barely ate anything. David placed food in front of her, special dragon food that the shelter had given him, made from proteins and minerals that dragons needed. Luna would sniff at it and then turn away. David tried different foods. He tried fresh fish. He tried meat. He tried vegetables and fruits. Nothing seemed to interest her. David began to worry that she would waste away just as she had nearly done at the shelter. But David did not give up. Every morning he would wake early and sit with Luna in the room. He would not try to touch her or force her to do anything. He would simply sit nearby and read or work on his computer, staying in the room with her for hours. He wanted her to know that she was not alone. He wanted her to understand that he would not leave her. At night, David would hear Luna trembling in her corner. Sometimes she made small crying sounds like whimpers. David realized that she was having nightmares, remembering the terrible things that had happened to her in her past. On these nights, David would sit as close to her as she would allow and speak to her in a soft, calm voice. He would say simple things like, "You are safe now, and I am here with you, and nobody will hurt you anymore." He did not know if she understood his words, but the sound of his calm voice seemed to help her. After a few weeks, the trembling became less frequent. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after Luna had arrived, David decided to play some music. He had an old keyboard in his apartment, something he had not touched in many years. He set it up in Luna's room and began to play. He chose soft, gentle music, pieces he had learned when he was a child but had never played since. The notes drifted through the room, filling the space with sound and feeling. Then something extraordinary happened. Luna's body suddenly became rigid. David stopped playing, worried that the music had frightened her. But before he could move, Luna's scales began to change color. It started as a small shimmer of light across her back. Then the color spread across her entire body. Her dull gray scales transformed into a brilliant, glowing blue, the color of a clear summer sky. The blue light seemed to pulse and shimmer with the music. Luna's eyes, which had been empty and lifeless for so long, suddenly came alive. They were still blue, but now they held something: awareness, emotion, interest. David's heart nearly stopped. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his entire life. He began to play again very softly. As the music continued, Luna stood up. She moved closer to the keyboard, her body still shimmering with that incredible blue light. Her wings unfurled slightly, and they glowed like stained glass windows in a cathedral. After that day, everything changed. Luna began to eat regularly. Her body grew stronger. Her scales remained that brilliant blue color more and more often. She began to explore her room, investigating every corner and every object. She would follow David from room to room, staying close to him but not quite touching him. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Luna's behavior transformed completely. She was no longer the broken, withdrawn creature from the shelter. She became curious and playful. She would nudge David's hand with her nose, asking him to pet her. She would follow him into the kitchen and watch as he prepared meals. She seemed to understand his routines and his moods. One evening David was feeling sad. He sat alone on his couch, thinking about his lonely life and all the years he had spent isolated and unhappy. Luna approached him and placed her head on his lap. She did not move for several hours. She simply stayed there, her warm head resting against his legs, as if she understood his pain and wanted to comfort him. Tears rolled down David's face, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of gratitude and relief. For the first time in his life, David felt truly connected to another being. As the months passed, David realized that Luna was not just healing from her trauma. She was healing him too. His lonely apartment no longer felt empty. His quiet evenings no longer felt sad. He had someone to care for, and that someone cared for him in return. Their bond grew stronger every day. Luna would rest her head against David's chest and make a low rumbling sound that David thought might be purring. When David left for work in the morning, Luna would follow him to the door and press her nose against the glass, watching him until he disappeared from view. The sad dragon from the shelter and the lonely man from the city had found each other, and in doing so, they had both found something they had been searching for their entire lives. They had found home. One night, about 8 months after Luna had arrived at David's apartment, something unusual happened. David was sitting at his desk in his study, working on a computer program for his job. The room was filled with the soft glow of multiple monitors. Luna was sleeping on a cushion nearby, her scales shimmering gently in the darkness. It was past midnight and David was tired, but he had a deadline for his project. Suddenly Luna woke up. She stood and walked over to David's desk. This was not unusual, she often came to check on him during the night. But this time she did something different. She reached up with one of her front claws and touched the holographic display that floated above David's keyboard. The display flickered and changed. Luna touched it again and more images appeared on the screen. David watched in confusion as Luna continued to interact with his computer system. She seemed to know exactly what she was doing. She swiped through files and opened programs with precision. David had spent years learning how to use computers effectively, but Luna moved through the system as if she had been doing this her whole life. Then Luna did something that made David's breath catch in his throat. She pulled up a complex mathematical equation, one of the most difficult programs David had ever tried to write. It was code that he had been struggling with for weeks. Luna studied it for a moment and then she made changes to it. She deleted sections and rewrote others. She added new functions and optimized the structure. When she was finished, David ran the program to test it. It worked perfectly. It solved the problem that had been frustrating him for months. David sat back in his chair, his mind racing. His hands were shaking slightly. "Luna," he whispered. "What are you?" Over the next few days, David began to explore Luna's abilities more carefully. He set up tests on his computer to see what she could do. He discovered that Luna could understand complex mathematical problems. She could write code. She could process information at speeds that seemed impossible for a biological creature. She could solve problems that would take David hours to figure out in just minutes. David realized that Luna was not just intelligent. She was extraordinarily intelligent. She possessed a level of cognitive ability that was far beyond normal. He began to research Lyrian dragons more deeply. He found scientific papers that had been published about them, though most of the research was outdated and incomplete. One paper, written by a researcher named Dr. Elena Foster, suggested that Lyrian dragons might possess computational abilities similar to advanced artificial intelligence systems. But the research had never been fully developed or verified. David made a decision. He contacted Dr. Elena Foster directly. He sent her an email explaining that he had adopted a Lyrian dragon and that he believed she had remarkable cognitive abilities. He included some basic data and asked if she would be interested in meeting Luna. To his surprise, Dr. Elena responded within hours. She was very interested and asked if she could visit as soon as possible. 2 days later, Dr. Elena arrived at David's apartment. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and intelligent dark eyes. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent her life studying creatures and pursuing knowledge. When she saw Luna, she stopped moving completely. She stared at the dragon for a long moment without saying anything. "My God," Dr. Elena finally whispered. "She's beautiful." Over the next several hours, Dr. Elena conducted tests with Luna. She asked her questions through David's computer system, using words and mathematical problems and logic puzzles. Luna answered everything correctly. Dr. Elena's expression grew more and more amazed as the testing continued. When she was finished, she sat down on David's couch and looked at him with wide eyes. "David, do you understand what this means?" Dr. Elena asked. This dragon has a mind that is unlike anything I have ever encountered. Her cognitive abilities are extraordinary. She can process information, solve complex problems, and demonstrate reasoning that rivals the most advanced artificial intelligence systems we have created. But her thinking is fundamentally different from AI. She thinks with intuition and emotion as well as logic. She thinks with what I would call wisdom. David nodded slowly. He had begun to understand this himself. Dr. Elena continued, Lyrian dragons were classified as a rare species decades ago, but very little serious research has been done on them. I believe the scientific community does not fully understand what they are capable of. If your Luna is a typical example of her species, then Lyrian dragons should be recognized as one of the most intelligent species in the galaxy. This is a discovery that could change everything. Over the following weeks, Dr. Elena worked with David and Luna to document Luna's abilities. They created detailed reports and gathered scientific data. Dr. Elena began to prepare a research paper for publication. She spoke about presenting their findings at major scientific conferences. She talked about the implications for understanding intelligence and consciousness across different species. But as they prepared their research, David began to feel worried. He thought about what would happen if the wider world learned about Luna's abilities. He thought about corporations and governments that might want to use her for their own purposes. He thought about the terrible things that had been done to her before the shelter rescued her. He realized that her previous owners had probably discovered her intelligence as well. That was likely why they had kept her locked in a basement cage. One night, David sat with Luna and tried to explain his concerns. He told her that soon many people might learn about how special she was. He told her that not everyone would treat her with kindness. He told her that she might become valuable to people who did not care about her well-being. Luna listened to everything he said. Then she moved close to David and rested her head against his chest. In that moment, David understood that Luna was not worried. She trusted him. She believed that he would protect her no matter what happened next. But David was not sure he could keep that promise. The news about Luna spread faster than David could have imagined. Dr. Elena's research paper was published in a major scientific journal, and within days, it became the most talked about discovery in the scientific community. News outlets around the world began reporting on the story. Magazines published headlines like, Dragon with Genius-Level Intelligence Discovered, and Lyrian Dragons may be Galaxy's most intelligent species. The story captured people's imaginations everywhere. But not everyone was excited about the discovery for good reasons. Within 2 weeks, David began to receive visits from people who were not kind and not interested in science. The first visitors were from a massive corporation called Nexus Industries. They arrived at David's apartment building in sleek black vehicles. There were 3 of them, all dressed in expensive gray suits. Their leader was a tall woman named Victoria Chin, who had cold eyes and a thin smile. Mr. Harrison, Victoria said, using David's last name in a way that felt threatening. Nexus Industries would like to make you an offer. We are interested in acquiring your dragon. We can offer you a substantial sum of money. More money than you could earn in 10 lifetimes. David's stomach felt sick. Luna is not for sale, he said firmly. She is my companion and she is safe here with me. Victoria's smile did not change. I think you misunderstand, Mr. Harrison. We are not really making an offer. We are informing you of our intentions. Luna is a research asset of significant value. Our company has invested heavily in studying Lyrian dragon genetics and cognition. We have documentation suggesting that this particular dragon may have been part of our research program before she was stolen. That's a lie, David said. Luna was rescued from an illegal collector. She was never part of any company program. Victoria stepped closer to David. Whether that is true or not is a matter of perspective, Mr. Harrison. What matters is that we have the legal resources and the government connections to make your life very difficult if you do not cooperate. We can tie you up in court proceedings for years. We can investigate your finances. We can make claims about your fitness to care for an extraterrestrial creature. In the end, Luna will come to us anyway. The only question is whether you want to do this the easy way or the hard way. After Victoria and her team left, David felt terrified. He called Dr. Elena and told her what had happened. Dr. Elena was furious. She told David that Nexus Industries was known for aggressive and unethical practices. They had been investigated multiple times for exploiting alien species and for illegal research. She said that Nexus Industries would stop at nothing to obtain Luna because they recognized the tremendous value of her abilities. Over the following days and weeks, the pressure on David increased dramatically. Nexus Industries filed legal documents claiming ownership of Luna. They hired lawyers and appeared at David's workplace, demanding that his company fire him or face legal consequences. They spread rumors through the media suggesting that David was an unfit caretaker and that Luna was being abused. They sent intimidating letters to his home, making threats and demands. David began to feel hopeless. He hired a lawyer, but his lawyer told him that Nexus Industries had far greater legal resources. The lawyer said that without substantial public support, David would likely lose Luna in the courts. David spent sleepless nights worrying about what would happen. He held Luna close and promised her that he would fight to keep her safe, but he was not sure he could keep that promise. Then one evening Luna did something extraordinary. She walked over to David's computer terminal and activated it herself. She began to type a message. David watched as words appeared on the screen. Luna was not typing in code or mathematical symbols. She was typing in human language. Slowly and carefully she spelled out her story. The message told about the dark basement where she had been kept. It described the pain and fear and loneliness she had experienced before the shelter rescued her. It explained how David had shown her kindness when no one else would. It described the healing that had occurred through their bond. And then Luna wrote something that made David cry. She wrote, "I choose David. I choose freedom. I choose to tell my story." Luna's message was unlike anything David had ever seen. She was not just communicating facts. She was sharing her emotions and her experiences in a way that was deeply moving and profoundly human. David immediately sent the message to Dr. Elena and asked her what they should do. Dr. Elena's response was immediate. She told David that Luna's message was so powerful and so unusual that it could change everything. She suggested that they broadcast it publicly. She said that if billions of people heard directly from Luna about what she had experienced, it would be impossible for Nexus Industries to continue their assault. David asked Luna if that was what she wanted. Luna responded by creating a more complete version of her message. She added details and emotions and poetry to her story. She described what it meant to be intelligent but powerless. She described what it meant to be valued only for one's usefulness. She created something that was part autobiography, part art, part philosophical statement. Dr. Elena helped David prepare the message for broadcast. They posted it on every major communication platform across the galaxy. Within hours, billions of people were watching Luna's story. People were crying. People were angry. People were moved in ways they had never experienced before. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Public outcry erupted against Nexus Industries. People protested outside their buildings. Their stock price crashed dramatically. Governments began investigating their practices. Major news outlets demanded answers from the company's leadership. Social media was flooded with support for David and Luna. Within days, Nexus Industries withdrew all their legal claims against David. They issued a statement saying they had made a mistake and that they recognized Luna's right to self-determination. The company's CEO resigned in disgrace. Investigation committees were established to examine the company's past practices. David sat in his apartment, holding Luna close, watching the news reports unfold. He realized that Luna had made her choice. She had chosen not just to be with him but to change the world. Her voice, once silent in a shelter corner, had become a voice that millions of people could not ignore. 1 year after Luna's message had spread across the galaxy, David stood in a large official building in the capital city. He was wearing a dark suit that felt uncomfortable against his skin. Luna stood beside him, her scales shimmering with shades of blue and silver. Around them were dozens of government officials, scientists, lawyers, and reporters. Everyone was waiting for a hearing to begin. The Interspecies Ethics Commission had been created in response to Luna's story and the public outcry that followed. This commission was responsible for establishing new laws and protections for alien species that possessed intelligence and consciousness. Today's hearing would determine whether Luna would be officially recognized as a sentient being with full legal rights. The commission consisted of 5 judges, each appointed by different planetary governments. The head judge was an elderly man named Robert Williams. He had kind eyes and had spent his entire career studying the rights of alien species. He looked down at David and Luna with genuine interest and respect. "David Harrison and Luna," Judge Williams began, "you have been brought before this commission to determine whether Luna should be granted legal status as a sentient being with full rights to self-determination and protection under galactic law. Before we make our decision, we would like to hear from you both. David, would you like to speak first?" David stood up. His voice was shaky at first, but it became stronger as he spoke. He talked about the day he met Luna at the shelter. He described how broken and sad she had been. He explained how, through patience and love, she had healed. He talked about discovering her intelligence and about the attempts by Nexus Industries to exploit her. He described Luna's decision to share her story with the world. Luna is not just intelligent, David said. She is conscious. She has emotions and preferences and dreams. She makes choices. She suffers when people are cruel to her, and she feels joy when she is with people she loves. She is a person, not a possession. She deserves the same rights and protections that any conscious being deserves. When David finished speaking, he sat down. Judge Williams nodded and then looked at Luna. Luna, we have read your message that you shared with the world. We have studied it carefully. But we would like to hear from you directly. Do you understand why you are here today? Luna stepped forward. She moved to a communication terminal that had been set up for her. With her claws, she began to type. Words appeared on screens throughout the room so that everyone could read what she wrote. Her message was clear and powerful. Luna wrote about what it meant to be treated as a tool rather than a being. She wrote about the pain of captivity and the healing that came through genuine connection. She wrote about David's kindness and about her choice to stay with him not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wrote about her dreams for the future and her hope that other creatures like her would be treated with respect and dignity. When Luna finished writing, there was complete silence in the large room. Many people were crying. Judge Williams removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. This commission has heard sufficient evidence, Judge Williams announced. We have no doubt that Luna is a sentient being possessed of consciousness, emotion, and the capacity for complex reasoning. We recognize her as a person under galactic law. She is granted full legal rights and protections. Furthermore, we recommend that all Lyrian dragons and any other species found to possess similar cognitive and emotional capacity be granted the same recognition and protections. The courtroom erupted in applause. David felt tears streaming down his face. Luna moved close to him and pressed her head against his shoulder. Over the following months, David and Luna worked with Dr. Elena to establish the Luna Sanctuary Research Institute. The institute was created to study Lyrian dragons and other alien species with intelligence and consciousness. But unlike previous research, this institute was built on principles of respect and care. The creatures were not treated as specimens or tools. They were treated as beings with inherent worth and dignity. The sanctuary was built on a beautiful estate outside the city. There were large open spaces where dragons could fly and play. There were scientists and caregivers who worked gently with the creatures, learning from them rather than exploiting them. Other dragons that had been rescued from illegal collectors or abusive situations were brought to the sanctuary to heal, just as Luna had healed. David became the director of the sanctuary. He worked every day to help other creatures recover from trauma and to live lives of freedom and purpose. Dr. Elena led the research team, studying dragon cognition and abilities with respect and care. The sanctuary became a model for how alien species should be treated across the galaxy. On the first anniversary of Luna's legal recognition, a celebration was held at the sanctuary. Hundreds of people came to visit. They walked through the grounds and watched the dragons playing and flying. Many of them had been moved by Luna's story and had come to understand that creatures from other worlds deserved compassion and respect. As the sun began to set, David and Luna stood on a hill overlooking the sanctuary. Other dragons flew through the air around them, their scales shimmering in the golden light. Luna rested her head on David's shoulder, and David wrapped his arm around her neck. David thought about the lonely man he had been before he met Luna. He thought about the sad dragon sitting in a corner at the shelter. He thought about how one act of compassion had changed both their lives. He thought about how Luna's voice had changed the world and had created new laws to protect creatures that had been voiceless for so long. "Thank you," David whispered to Luna. "Thank you for letting me be part of your life. Thank you for teaching me what it means to truly connect with another being." Luna made a soft rumbling sound, the sound that David had learned meant she was content and happy. She had come so far from the broken creature in the shelter. She had healed, she had grown, and she had become a voice for all the creatures that had been forgotten and abused. David realized that the real miracle was not Luna's intelligence or her extraordinary abilities. The real miracle was love. It was the love that had healed Luna's broken heart. It was the love that had healed David's lonely soul. And it was that love that had inspired the world to change. Together, they stood on the hill as darkness fell and stars began to appear in the sky. David and Luna had found each other when they both needed it most. They had healed each other. And in doing so they had changed the world.